Good evening, geographers. Tonight we're going to look at what culture is made of. So, first of all, we have a habit. A habit is a repetitive act that an individual performs. There can be a lot of individuals performing the act, but it's not necessarily so many people that it becomes an overwhelming custom. For example, there's some people that are in the habit of running marathons. Most of us are never going to take up that habit, but there are quite a few people that do it. A custom is a habit of a group that becomes an identifying characteristic. So for Americans, customs like Christmas, there's a lot of Americans that celebrate Christmas. Other customs are things that we do on a daily basis, like bathing. Americans get up and they bathe every day. Americans get up and brush their teeth every day. Americans get up and eat usually at least 3 meals a day. So those are American customs. And they become so customary that we think if we're not doing them, there's something wrong. Like, how many times have you heard breakfast is the most important meal of the day? That, oh, you better eat lunch or you're going to be starving. And none of these things are really true. They're just so customary. They're expected to happen on a daily basis. And then there's culture. So culture is a collection of a group of customs. So when you put all of those different things that people do in a society, that makes up a culture. So in the United States, what are things that make up our culture? Well, we like sports a lot. We like fast food. We celebrate Christmas. We brush our teeth every day. We shower every day. We go to school. Most of us go to school and complete high school. There's a lot of things that Americans do on an everyday basis, and sometimes it's hard to see our own culture because it's right in front of our face and surrounding us all the time. So it's hard for us to see, but Americans very much do have a culture. So we're going to take a look at material culture artifacts. So material culture is culture that you can see with your eyes, and houses represent our culture, our furniture represents our culture, instruments that we play represent our culture, and books represent our culture. So when you think about houses that are unique to a culture, you can think about the Asian design and how those houses look. And American houses, think about how big our houses are. When my friend from England came here to visit me in Norco, and she was so amazed how big our house is. And my house is really, by California standards, especially in Riverside County, is really not that large. We're kind of average to small. So houses will develop a certain look based upon the culture, and that's a material artifact. Furniture, think about how in a lot of cultures people sit on the floor. In Asian cultures, many people sit on the floor. So having a chair that's 16 inches off the ground is not necessarily something that you're going to use. You'll have your table, but you're not going to be having tall chairs. Your table's low as well. And instruments we play in, obviously books are going to represent elements of our culture. So non-material culture is culture that you can't see. It's values that you have. For example, Americans value freedom. We value equality. We value opportunity. Beliefs that you have. A religion can be a belief. Also, just a belief that you can do anything you want to do. How many of you have heard that from your parents? If you put your mind to it, you can do it. Well, not every culture teaches their kids that. We do in the United States. Behaviors are non-material culture as well. How you are expected to act in certain situations, and how you are expected to give eye contact or not give eye contact. Those are behavioral, non-material cultural norms. And then also, lastly, is norms. What do we expect people to act, and what do we expect as normal? So many people consider our president as somebody who bucks the norms. He says what he thinks. He uses social media. He is not very filtered. So he's definitely somebody who hasn't followed the pattern of past presidents. So norms are often based upon what has happened in the past. A culture trait is a single attribute of a culture, often not confined to a single area. So, for example, let's say that eating rice is a culture trait. People eat rice all over the world. One particular culture trait can't define an entire culture. It's just something that a lot of people do. It can be more specific than that. Rice is pretty general. Let's say eating sushi. People all over the world eat sushi. We have people in Japan who eat sushi, but you know what? Americans eat sushi. Probably Canadians eat sushi. You might even find a sushi place in Mexico. There's places all over the world that will eat sushi. Culture complex is the combination of different culture traits in distinctive ways. Common values, beliefs, behaviors, and artifacts that make up one distinct culture. So a culture complex can exist in a school, it can exist in a state, it can exist in a country. If you think about the culture of Eastvale, the culture complex of Eastvale versus the culture complex of Norco, you could pick out a few different culture traits that are going to look different in those different cultural complexes. Next, we're going to look at the culture system. So this is a group of interconnected cultural complexes, any area with strong ties that bind its people together. So if we looked at the culture of Eastvale and the culture of Norco, there's going to be a lot of differences, but there's also going to be a lot of similarities, a lot of things that define them. So if you took all of the cultures of all of the individual cities in Riverside County and then put them together, you could create a culture system. Riverside County has a distinct cultural system than some other places. And this is a much smaller scale, what I'm talking about right now, city to county. You could do the same thing, state to country. You could do country to continent. So there's a lot of different scales you can look at that. Okay, so a culture region is an area marked by culture that distinguishes it from other regions. So you can look at larger areas, for example, the South. Well, what's included in that? A whole lot of different states. And all those states are very distinct and unique. But you can still come up with a culture region that is the South. Another culture region, the United States of America. Another culture region, Southern California. So there can be many different scales for culture region as well. How about cultural realm? A large area marked by a number of cultural regions. It is set apart from other world areas because of these regions. So think about North America. And I've talked to you about this before, how Mexico, while yes, it's part of North America, is technically part of Latin America. Latin America being its own cultural realm, and North America being specifically, at least for human geography, being United States and Canada. So what are the traits, complexes, and systems that make up your community? So think about Eastvale. So I want you to think about some traits. What are some culture traits that are in Eastvale? Maybe you'll find those traits in other places as well. And put them together into a complex. And then after you create a complex for Eastvale, so let's say 5 different traits making up a complex, then I would like you to combine the complex with other complexes in the area to make a system. Let's say Riverside County or Southern California, some kind of system that combines more cultures than just Eastvale, individually Eastvale.